folks. Welcome to another episode of the Preparedness Podcast, the podcast that does bring you the best in preparedness information. You can find us online at thepreparednesspodcast.com. My name is Rob Hannes, and I am the host for the show. You can reach me through email at rob@prepcast.info. We are doing the second part of setting up a basic toolkit. I have Greg with me, and we are going to be continuing that just after a couple quick announcements, and they are the listener survey. I want to thank everybody that's filled out the listener survey. For those of you that haven't, if you have some time, if you could go to the website and click on the Take the Listener Survey banner. I think it's on the left side of the website, and it's a completely anonymous survey. It's done by the company that tracks the podcast, and it kind of helps us learn the audience, their behavior, the demographics, stuff like that. And there's a couple places for likes and dislikes, and that is a really good way for you to communicate back to us anonymously what you like, what you don't like. And we've got some really good favorable comments both for likes and dislikes, and that helps us make a better podcast. Also, the Preparedness Podcast forum, this is something that's been around for years. I've neglected to actually mention it, except for maybe the very beginning of the new series, but we've got a small group of people there that seem to be very knowledgeable and wanted to help out people in finding solutions for their preps and preparations and stuff. You can actually go directly to the forum at thepreparednesspodcast.com/forum, and it will take you right there. You can also get to it from a link that's on the website. If you go to the main page, you will see at the top of the page, it says Preparedness Forum, and the navigation link's up there. And when you click on that, it takes you to an intermediary page that you have to click on the link. And I will eventually fix that so it goes directly to the forum. So go ahead and check it out. I think you'll like what you find there. There's a lot of good information that's on the forum as well. Also, if you could do me a favor, if you are a subscriber to the podcast via iTunes, if you could leave us a rating and a comment, I would appreciate it. This is how a lot of people find the podcast, is based on the ratings. Apparently, the more active the ratings are, the more active that people are commenting stuff, the more we show up in searches and whatever. And as we're trying to get out to as many people as possible so we can help them get prepared, that would help the podcast get noticed. Speaking of which, I started putting out the podcast on YouTube. No, I'm not actually doing any special videos or anything. I'm just taking the podcast, putting the logo on them, and sticking them up on YouTube. So if you have a friend who doesn't have an MP3 player, or your parent or your brother or somebody who doesn't really know how to play MP3s, or not even sure what that is, you could send them a direct link to the podcast that's on YouTube, and all they have to do is click the play button. So getting to setting up a basic toolkit, last show we were talking with Greg about the basic tools that you should have, kind of looking at some of the ways to find a quality tool, and we had looked at hammers and screwdrivers and sockets and wrenches, and we're going to continue on. Greg, one thing that we forgot in the wrenches last time was Allen wrenches, which I think we've all seen these. These are the little L-shaped hexagonal tools that come in a lot of toys and furniture kits and stuff like that. Is it just me, or do these seem like they're being made more and more out of softer metal?
Yeah, it's just you.
All right, then I must be the lucky one.
Quit shopping at Harbor Freight. Unfortunately, a lot of the Allens that we see out there, a lot of the internal hex fasteners that are put on there, they're put on with quite a bit of torque, or they're using some Loctite or something like that. And so when you go ahead and use the little Allen wrenches, you wind up twisting them and bending them a little bit. So, but they're sacrificial. That's just going to happen with them. You can get higher end Allen wrenches. You just have to, again, pay more for them. These things seem to come everywhere. I've probably got, I don't know how many of these knocking around all over the place, usually 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch size ones. But in any case, again, higher quality, it's going to last longer. Don't expect those to last a long time. They will strip out fairly easily, both the socket itself sometimes. The other thing you want to do with them, though, and the one thing with these Allen wrenches is you have to have a good fit in there. You actually have to go ahead. You don't want a loose fit. You don't want it sloppy in there, because one of the things you don't want to do with any kind of Allen fastener, with any kind of internal hex fastener, is you don't want that thing to strip out. Then they become a real pain to go ahead and pull out. But again, there are ways to go around them. So
right. So okay. So I've had a couple Allen wrench sets, and one of them was kind of like a Swiss Army knife, sort of. Yeah. And another one was the longer end of the Allen wrench was in like a little spring socket that you could actually take it off, but that wire wound spring kind of kept it together. I didn't like the springy one because they just dangle and stuff. But the Swiss Army one, it fell apart on me. So I don't know if that was cheapness or whatever, but I think it also had more wrenches on the like the keychain one. Sure. So again, this is another question of quality, I'm sure, but again, what is the range that we're looking for here as far as sizes?
Size-wise, as far as for metrics, you're going to start very small, tiny, 0.5 millimeter, for instance, and go all the way up to, easily 1 centimeter. But again, are you going to be needing those in your normal work at the home for a basic toolkit? No, you're not going to be needing that. You're going to be dealing with some fairly common ones. 4.5 millimeter, for instance, is a fairly common one. Same thing goes for the SAE. You're going to be dealing with 2 or 3 sizes. 1/4 inch is a very common one. Any of the sets that you get are going to have those sizes in them. What I might say do, though, is there are a couple of different formats for the Allen wrenches that you find, anywhere from the standard L-shaped ones to extended handle L's that you can get now, to ball end Allen wrenches. The good thing about the ball end Allen wrenches, as long as they're a high quality one that actually fits in that fastener, is that you can go ahead and you can offset them a little bit. You have a little bit of play where they'll still go ahead and engage tightly and enable you to turn it. Of course, a lot of these Allen fasteners, they're going to be in fairly tight areas, so you sometimes need to offset it. So anyway, take a look for the ball ends. I prefer those. The other thing is, if you do want the highest end Allen keys that you can go ahead and get, look for T handles out there. You can get them in different lengths, but they're a higher end. They'll give you more torque, more control. The only problem, of course, is that they're a little bulkier to carry. But the T handle types are generally a higher end product.
Yeah, well, I can tell from using the little L-shaped ones, either trying to loosen a very tight Allen nut or trying to tighten it, especially as you get older and your hands get, more fragile or whatever. Yeah, it's tougher to do. A T-handle would have came in really handy.
Yeah, and you can also go ahead and you can actually get socket adapters that'll let you go ahead and use different size Allens in them. So you can actually get a lot more torque, a lot more feel, and a lot tighter contact. But again, that doesn't really come into the basic toolkit format either. Just something to know about.
Right. Before we move on to pliers, one of the things that you had mentioned, the really 1/4 millimeter Allen wrenches, that made me think of the glasses screws, or the screws that are in glasses and stuff.
Sure.
I find that the typical glasses repair kits or whatever, I'm always stripping out the screws.
Oh yeah.
Is that the screws? Is that the quality of the screws, or is that the quality of the drivers?
It's both. It's both. The screws that are in eyeglasses now, they're very soft when you get down to it. They're often fairly poorly made. except for the threads. The threads are fairly standardized, but the heads themselves. And the other thing you come across is most of the, quote unquote precision screwdriver sets out there are basically junk. They're low quality. You do have to go to a jeweler supply house to actually get the higher quality, properly tempered and properly contoured tips. And the tip contour is different on these little guys. So
that's what it
what's
seems
happening.
like. I don't mean to talk over, but that's what it seems like is I can't ever find a tip that fits properly.
Right.
And I'm constantly going from tip to tip because, when you're trying to fit the screwdriver head or the Allen head or whatever into what it is, it should be a nice, tight fit.
Yeah.
For example, the Phillips head should not rock. It should fit tight in there. I mean, when you look at it, it should look like it's the right size, not like, well, it's kind of loose, but it'll work anyways.
Exactly.
I can never find a tip that actually fits in these screws in the eyeglasses. Yeah. And it's really annoying because you don't want to over tighten it because then you're stripping it out. Right. Or at least stripping out the head.
Sure. Well, the other thing, if you do strip out that head, easiest fix for them, ideally easy fix for them really is just go ahead and grab them with a little pair of vice grips or a pair of needle nose pliers and just pull them out that way. But you can always go ahead and use, for instance, a very fine file or a Dremel tool to cut a slot across that screw and turn it into a straight blade accessible. That's the easiest way to get them out. Another thing to do with it is if you don't have, a good contact patch on there and you can kind of feel it getting sloppy and pulling out, is go ahead and take a little bit of, it can even be a little bit of grit off the ground, a little bit of sand or something like that. Ideally, it's lapping compound is what you want, and put it on the tip of the screwdriver, and then go ahead and try to turn out the screw. That grit, that grind in there will actually go ahead and make it grab better, and then you can go ahead and pull it out usually.
All right, let's go on to pliers. There are tons of pliers, and let's say pliers, vice grips, and wire cutters. They're all kind of a same sort of action there. What are we looking for? I know we have the standard plier. We've got the needle nose. There's another one. It's not a pipe wrench, but it's the one that's got the slots for adjusting the size of the grip.
The adjustable crescents? No,
not the adjustable crescents. It's I have one. And
you're like channel locks?
Yeah, channel locks.
Yeah, channel. That's actually manufacturer's name, trade name for them, but everybody calls them channel locks anyway. But yeah, okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I don't actually use the channel locks that much, but it's nice to know that if I needed it, it was there. I end up using the regular pliers and the needle nose the most. And I do have vice grips, but I try to avoid them because when I was in shop class, they were always like, never use vice grips unless you absolutely have to.
Exactly. Vice grips, basically what I look at vice grips at is if you have a rounded off fastener or a stripped fastener, they're very handy for that. If you need to make an expedient handle for something, they're great for that. But the real thing where they come in handy when you're going ahead and doing handwork on stuff is those vice grips are a portable vice. You can grab stuff, hold it tightly, manipulate it properly, and then do work on it. That's really where they come in handy. Okay? There are all sorts of vice grips. There's probably 6 different styles, from welding to Tinmans to whatever else. Standard ones that are out there are just go ahead and get not the smooth jaw, but get the serrated tip ones, curved pipe style, medium size, and you're going to be fine. That's going to cover most of what you're going to use vice grips for. And again, kind of use them for grabbing onto stuff and holding on stuff while you're working on it with some other tools. That's generally what I find myself using those vice grips for.
Right. Yeah. Don't make that your go-to open-end wrench.
No.
In other words, is what we're trying to say here.
Yeah. It's not suitable for that. You'll create problems down the road if you go ahead and you start treating them like that. But again, if you come across, and you do come across a lot of stuff, fasteners that are rounded off, you've got that particular nut, or that particular bolt that somebody's gone ahead and gotten the wrong socket size on there. They've completely rounded it off. Well, here you go, vice grips and replace it, or file it down into a new, bolt head, whatever you have to do.
Yeah, the vice grips is a really interesting tool that seems to be the last tool. Well, put it this way, it's not the first tool you want to grab. It's usually the last tool you have to grab because when you can't use the standard tools because something's stripped or it's too tight or it's kind of broken off or something, yeah, they come in really handy. But at the same time, if you grab that first, what happens is it ruins that head or ruins the screw or whatever.
Exactly. And as far as going ahead and talking about channel locks are terrifically handy. Usually I find out using them in plumbing, for instance. But the one that kind of has taken over somewhat from the channel locks I find myself using quite a bit are just strap wrenches of whatever style. And that's just a flexible band that has a lever arm on it that you can lock it back. You can wrap it around in a regularly shaped object or a pipe or whatever, and you can apply torque on that object, and usually without marring it is the other nice thing. So if you're doing work on faucets, for instance, or chrome tailpipes coming out of sinks, for instance, you don't mar that finish when you're twisting on them.
Yeah, you know what? That is a
wrenches.
Type of wrench that I recently, I don't want to say discovered or learned about because I kind of knew of them way back, again, in auto shop class where we were using that type of wrench to take off the oil filters.
Sure.
However, I did find that the strap wrench works very well for the military MFCs and the water cans.
Heck
whereas, you need to tighten them sometimes when they get old so they don't leak. But then you go to try to take them off. You're like, you can't open it.
Forget it. Yep.
That strap wrench is a great way to open up those cans without ruining the cap at all.
Sure. And the thing with that, if you just take a look, and a lot of these things, when you get down to it, if you take a look at the tool, you can identify the principle upon which it's based. You can make a strap wrench out of a 2x4, some fasteners, and a piece of webbing, and you have yourself a strap wrench. You can make a lot of expedient stuff out there, a lot of ad hoc stuff. Just kind of practice with it.
Let's talk about wire cutters. Now, I mean, the diagonal cutters that I have are great for like wire and general stuff, but I don't think they're going to do anything heavier like heavy gauge wire or fencing and stuff like that.
You can go ahead on using stuff like dikes. It just comes down to hand strength, really. If you get the higher quality ones, the ones that are properly tempered, they will go through mild steel, like, just how strong are your hands. 10 gauge fencing. I just use a regular pair of dikes just to go ahead and clip it. Any standard chain link fence goes right through it. 12 gauge, 14 gauge.
So what you're looking for is the temper then?
You're looking at a high quality tool. Klein, again, makes very high quality tools. Snap-on, Proto, those guys. They make very high quality ones. You're going to pay a considerable amount for it, but it's going to last a long time. The most standard ones that you find out there are the diagonal cutters. They're called dikes, or diagonal cutters, and they're the side cutting style. You can find them, straight on. You can find them bent over at 45-degree angle. Just get the regular straight ones. There's another style you'll find where the blades are actually perpendicular to the axis of the handles. They're a front cutting style. You can use those to go ahead and actually pry things out too. So they're kind of a double duty thing, but they don't have as much leverage as the diagonal cutters do, as the dikes do.
Okay, so the other things I have left here on the list are a lot of things that you would use around the house and not so much in an emergency situation. Things like tape measures, pencils, tape, nails, screws and clamps, glue, even a level and stuff. Is there anything that we need to look for or look out for when looking at some of this stuff? For example, a glue. Is there a good general purpose glue that we should have on hand that would be great for all sorts of repairs and stuff?
As far as that goes, I'd probably say a good 2-part epoxy. And probably not one that is a liquid thin, probably a gel, maybe a 5 minute to a longer set, but 5 minute would be a good compromise. Glues, unfortunately with glues, that's a huge subject just by itself. Going from early hide glues and paste glues and rice glues all the way up to like two-part epoxies or UV setting epoxies. They all do different materials better than other things, and for some there's no substitutions, but in general, if it's going to be a basic toolkit, go ahead and get yourself some, let's say some Elmer's or some Carpenter's yellow glue and aliphatic resin. It's going to be slightly weatherproof. It's going to set up on porous materials. It's going to bond those well. It's not going to do so well on non-porous materials. Then go ahead and get something like a two-part epoxy. That'll enable you to go ahead and do repairs on most smooth materials that are properly surface prepped. They're not going to be, potentially cosmetic repairs. Again, for cosmetic repairs, you have to go into the specialty adhesives oftentimes, but it'll let you do structural repairs. So between those two, a decent aliphatic yellow Carpenter's glue and two-part epoxy, you'll cover most of the stuff out there. And of course, you can go ahead and throw in stuff like super glue too. That doesn't hurt. But those two right there, Carpenter's glue and a two-part epoxy, that'll cover most of your things. The other thing you'll come across is not just that standard two-part epoxy, but you'll also come across stuff like JB Weld. That's another great thing to have around. JB Weld is more or less of a metal impregnated two-part epoxy that you can mold, and once it actually cures itself, it becomes very hard and almost machinable. Actually, it does become machinable when you get down to it. But you can use that to actually produce new parts if you need to. So another handy thing to have.
That's interesting. I had used it before, and I noticed it got really hard.
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't know you could actually use it to fabricate. I didn't know it was hard enough and dependable enough to actually fabricate parts from.
It's machinable, believe it or not. It's machinable. It's a standard. I do motorcycles. I've done small engines for years, and one of the standard things you carry on a motorcycle, on dirt bike, for instance, as part of your repair kit, is you carry a couple of the tubes of JB Weld, and it's a two-part, epoxy again. You break a case on the bike, an engine case, clean it off, JB Weld it. More than likely, it's going to be on there for a couple of years. It's terrific stuff. It doesn't last forever. The shelf life is not indefinite, so you have to replace it, let's say, every year, depending on what your conditions are. But it's something to have around and know how to use, too. That's the other thing.
I didn't realize it was that versatile.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what about tape? Is there anything that's, besides the typical standard duct tape, is there anything else we should be looking at that is highly versatile?
As far as the tapes go, of course, duct tape is kind of the standard go-to. If you need something with a little more bonding power, I prefer, there's a type kind of duct tape. It's called stucco tape, and you'll find it in different colors, but red is a fairly common one. It's a very, very high-tack tape, so it sticks like crazy to stuff. And it's a fiber-reinforced tape. You tear it off just like duct tape and you use it, but it'll bond to things that duct tape won't bond to, for instance, like stucco. Go figure. Past that point, masking tapes. Again, you're looking at cosmetic repair items here on that kind of stuff. One thing that does come in handy, just as far as going ahead and making repairs sometimes, other than duct tape, is take a look for any of the fiber or nylon reinforced packing tapes. Those, if you use them properly, as far as the tensile strength on them, it's terrific. So you can actually go ahead and do some fairly decent repairs using those nylon reinforced tapes.
Sounds good. Well, like I said, some of the things I have here is tape measure, pencils. I imagine we don't really need to. I mean, I have some of those. They're great to have. I don't know if there's anything special we need to look for those.
Carpenter's pencils.
Yeah, well, the oblong, I guess
exactly.
In my mind, that's what I was thinking, even though I said, but yeah, I was actually at Home Depot the other day.
Sure.
And I don't know if this is new. They always seem to have a box of those Carpenter pencils up at the register. But this time I saw, and I don't ever remember seeing this before. Of course, I'm not there all the time, but they had the sharpener for the pencils, which was like just an extra large. Now, I always just use a utility knife to sharpen them, but
exactly.
I was just like, oh, that's interesting.
Well,
I don't know how well they work, and I don't know if it's worth having one over, say, a utility knife just to sharpen it. But
yeah, they work fine. They'll give you a point on them, no problem. The problem with them is that they go ahead and they give you a pinpoint, a spike point. The good thing about the Carpenter's pencils, when you do sharpen them, you can actually go ahead and you can get a blade point on that lead, on that graphite. And the reason that becomes handy is you can actually go ahead and oftentimes get a finer line on items by going ahead and using that blade point. So, yeah, you can go ahead and get the sharpeners on them, but like you say, just use a utility knife, your belt knife, whatever you've got to go ahead. As long as it's a sharp knife, shave it down. It'll work fine.
Okay, speaking of utility knives, now when I think of the one with the razor blades, a little gray handle with the slide, that is that about as good as it gets, or is there something else we should be looking at? And I don't mean like a honey knife or a pocket knife. I mean a utility knife.
Yeah. Basically, the ones that I've gone ahead and optimized for, you've got the old packaging knives, the box cutters knives that are out there, which are the utility knives. You have to open up the actual handle to go ahead and swap out the blades. There are a ton of companies out there that are manufacturing fairly inexpensive, oftentimes folding utility knives, where it's just literally a push button or a clamp or a lever that you go ahead and manipulate, and you can slide out the used blade, flip it around, and get a new edge immediately. With those, they all seem to work pretty well. They are all pretty inexpensive. It comes down to going ahead and using a good blade on them, and then you're fine. Then you're good to go. But I've kind of gotten away. About the only time I use utility knives, just the standard old style with a retractable blade right now, is if I'm going ahead and I'm doing something like sometimes molding or some carpeting or something where I need that level of handle to be able to go ahead and get the force going on there. But in general, I just use the little guys that go ahead and let you flip the blades out and replace them immediately, because one of the things with the utility knives is you'll go through those blades a lot faster than you think if you're working them. You should always go ahead and run those sharp blades. Anytime they dull, toss it or flip it around and get that new edge on there.
Okay, what about saws? I mean, sawing by hand is a pain, especially if you're going to try to do any large amounts of cutting. However, we need saws to cut things. So we've got coping saws, we've got the wood saws, we've got hack saws. What is going to be the general basic? Here's a good saw or a couple saws that are going to get you through pretty much anything. Or most things. Okay. And one thing I'll say also is the reason saws don't cut well, as far as what you found, is that it's inferior manufacturing and inferior setups. Most of the saws that I see, for instance, the wood saws, if you go ahead and you take a look at the teeth on a wood saw, you'll see they have different contours, and they'll have different shapes. Some are designed to cut, some are designed to actually clear the cutting slot, the kerf, while you're moving it. And all those teeth need to be offset on angles away from the actual blade of the saw to actually open up the kerf. A lot of these manufacturers now, they're no longer doing that. They're actually very non-functional saws. They come off the shelf. You can set them up yourself if you want to take the time to actually figure out how to do it. It's not hard to do. It used to be a very standard skill set. But again, old books will help you. But in any case, back to it. Think about what you have to go ahead and cut as far as basic setups. You'll have to cut things from metal to plastics to wood to possibly, fiberboards to plasterboard, stucco, masonry. You can go ahead and you can get, just as one standardized saw, a standard hand hacksaw. You can get different style blades for it. So it's a very flexible item right there. There are different ones out there that are higher quality ones. Stanley makes a very good model. I'll go ahead and get Rob the link a little bit later on.
that I actually like quite a bit. That is actually adjustable, allows you to use different length blades, and you can get blades that'll cut metal, that'll cut wood, that'll cut masonry, that'll cut plastics, that'll cut metals, and I'll keep them in a single kit. So as a basic setup, that's fine. If you want to get into a carpenter's saw, if you want to get into the carpentry setup, in a way that's kind of getting a little bit out of the basic toolkit. But if you're going to go ahead and go that route, just a standard carpenter saw, properly, again, curved, properly sharpened, will work fine. No problem at all with that.
Cool. Well, I don't have any hand saws at all. I have a jigsaw is basically what I use, and a Dremel for everything. So I'm completely clueless when it comes to the saws. But I like the idea of basically having one saw frame and just replacing the blades. That's probably a good idea. Now, what about an awl? I mean, is that usable at all? I mean, I know you can use it to set detents for drilling and stuff like that, but is it really? I see it a lot when people talk about toolkits. It always seems to have an awl in there, but I don't know. Is that something that, other than say a stabbing weapon, is that anything that we really need to worry about? They're
inexpensive. They're a piercing tool. Like you say, you can go ahead and you can use them to set a divot, to go ahead and actually run something in easier. You can go ahead and use them to do a piercing on something so you can actually put a fastener in just by hand, or just to locate a fastener. If you're doing leather work or fabric work or something like that, you need an awl. You'll need to be able to go through that. For woodworking, you're using awls quite a bit. They're not an expensive tool. Is it part of the basic toolkit? I wouldn't consider it so. And an awl, heck, when you get down to it, you can take an old screwdriver, sharpen it. You have an awl. It's not exactly a rocket science item. They don't have to worry too much about blade angles and all that other good stuff on there, but they're handy. Get an old one.
Well, like I said, I see them. I know why you would want one, but I don't use them.
Well, it's a piercing tool. You can also use it for manipulation, for fishing things out of spaces. The other thing to have, once you get a little bit out of the basic toolkit, is look for old sets of dental tools, the little picks and the pries. If you're working on anything fine, like you were mentioning you were working on a laptop earlier, being able to go ahead and get in tiny crevices and scrape out and fish out, fasteners that you've dropped and that kind of stuff, that's very handy. You can get those.
As a matter of fact, I do have one of those in my tool roll, which I have used to do exactly that. It's a dental tool that's got these crazy. I don't know how to describe the angles of them.
Oh, I know.
Apparently, they're designed to get into these really weird places, but they are good for scraping off. Even checking some fouling in weapons in these tight corners, and scraping where you can't necessarily get to with anything else. So that's interesting you say that, because I do have one in there, and every time I open up the rule, I look at this thing and I'm like, why do I have this here? It's a dental tool, but it does come in handy.
Yeah, and they don't cost much. You used to go ahead and the standard place you could get them before Harbor Freight and all the Chinese imports came in was you would just literally ask your dentist. They were always tossing them because they have a limited lifespan. So they'd happily just, how many do you want? Here, take them.
I think I got mine at one of the gun shows years ago.
Yeah. Standard source.
Let's talk about, I think you should probably include safety glasses or goggles for obvious reasons. And I think that those are pretty standard as far as safety. If they're safety rated and fit well, they're probably fine. But work gloves. Now, there's tons of work gloves. I know the canvas ones, they've got canvas leather. They've got the cheap ones that are like $3, and they've got some really expensive ones. Where is my money going to be best spent for a good quality pair of work gloves that aren't going to be, shred the first day I'm actually, say after an earthquake or a tornado, when I'm using the gloves to clean debris away. I want something that's going to last. I don't want something that's going to just fall apart, because that doesn't do any good.
You're looking at leather. is what it comes down to. Different types of leather will go ahead and different combinations of leather will give you different feels for different jobs. Basically, for the outdoor work, like you're saying, just get a standard rough cut leather glove as long as it fits properly. I have a tendency usually to, if I'm borderline on sizes, I'll go one size up. If you use gloves for a long time, during, for a full day's work, 10, 12 hours, something like that, you can actually abrade yourself. You'll find out you'll have bad pressure points in there. It'll make it very painful the next day to actually use the gloves again. So that's why I go one size up. Who makes good ones? It's not Harbor Freight, I'll tell you that right now. That is one thing that I've actually found, that if you go to the big box stores, the Home Depots and the Lowe's, etc., that you can find decent work gloves. You don't need to spend the most money available for them. The ones that are out there, if you do wear the gloves a lot, though, I will say, and if you're not using, serious manual, you're not doing ditch digging, for instance, you're not doing tree trimming, consider going with some of the nylon-backed gloves that are out there, the mechanic-style gloves. You can get them in all sorts of different palm styles and finger styles, from highly protective to fairly thin leathers that enable you to manipulate stuff. If you got to wear the gloves a lot, go with those mechanic glove styles. It'll let your hands breathe. They're a lot more comfortable. They cost a lot more, is the only thing, and they're nowhere near as durable as those actual full leather gloves that you'll find out there. Okay,
so what is that? Is that like a leather palm and a nylon mesh back?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's lycra nylon mesh. And the leather palm, that can be just a straight leather palm. It can be actually a leather palm with gel inserts if you're using impact tools, for instance. It can be pigskin if you need fine control, fine feel on there. It can be a rough cut leather. There's all sorts of different variants they make, gauntlets, however. But just as a day in, day out glove, mechanics gloves work fine. The ones that you specifically get, Harbor Freight does sell them. They don't last anywhere near as long as the actual more expensive mechanics brand gloves. But again, you pay for that. Durability there.
What about the common? It's like a heavy canvas with a suede palm and fingers. Mm-hmm. They're like, I don't know, $3 to $5 at either the big box stores or Walmart, Home Depot, whatever. Now I've had some, but I've never actually had to use them for extended hard work.
They don't last. They fall apart.
Okay, that's what
they fall apart, and that's the problem with a lot of this stuff. Is, as talking as preparedness advocates, there are a lot of people out there, and there are a lot of proponents for, you just go ahead and get whatever you can get just to get the kit together. Get the cheapest stuff, because you're probably not going to need it. And there's a definite problem with this. When you do need it, you're going to be an extremist. You're going to have to use it. You're probably going to have to use it in conditions that are not ideal. It's not something you want to worry about. You definitely don't want the stuff to fail, because, again, if you're actually having to use this in emergency situations, it's hit the fan. You can't afford additional failures. Get the higher quality stuff. Again, it'll last longer. And especially when you're dealing with personal protective gear. Safety glasses, goggles, work gloves, nitrile gloves, chaps if you're doing any kind of chainsaw work, arm guards, Kevlars, whatever you need to do, face shields, hearing protection. Hearing protection's huge. Definitely something to think about there. That all that hearing damage is cumulative. You're stuck with it for the rest of your life. So don't lose it.
Right. And that's something we've been pushing on the podcast, is to make sure you're buying quality stuff. It is not better to have something that's cheap and be thinking that, well, it's better than nothing, because honestly, it's not better than nothing.
Right.
Because if you think that, I have something, then you're complacent that you're prepared until you need it and it breaks, and guess what? Now you don't have it. Whereas if you don't have it, you're aware of your vulnerabilities and your limitations, and you're going to compensate for that otherwise. So, yes, that's the buy once, cry once philosophy. Buy quality is very much something that unfortunately has to go through everything, because that's why we prepare. You prepare to be ready. but
exactly.
you don't want to be ready with stuff that's. I mean, you would never put 20-year-old MREs into your food storage and say, "Oh, this is what I have, and this is good for the next 25 years." You wouldn't do that because, well, at least I hope you wouldn't, because it wouldn't work very well.
Yeah. Well, and another thing here to look at these items. Again, go to the specialty shops as far as the work gloves, safety equipment, that kind of thing, especially for outdoor work. I'd go ahead and I'd go over to not necessarily a gardening store, not necessarily a small engine, repair store or a nurseryman store. I'd be looking at somebody that actually goes ahead and does tree trimming, logging, that kind of a supplier. Actually a very good supplier that's a catalog is Forestry Suppliers Incorporated. They've been around for years and years, and they supply forestry workers, archaeology workers, geologists, all this stuff with the tools that are necessary for out there. And they do have very high quality items. I can vouch for those guys.
Oh, very cool. Hey, Greg, let's take a break right here to go to the sponsor for the podcast. When you get to the financial portion of your preparedness plan and you start looking at ways that you can save the value of your savings, you're going to realize that there's only one real answer, and that's gold and silver. While a lot of people, including myself, call this an investment to be able to buy gold and silver to protect your savings, it's not really an investment. What you're doing is you're protecting the value of your money from inflation and from the erosion of the dollar. And it's important that you act now, because the dollar can still buy reasonable amounts of gold and silver for relatively cheap. As inflation increases, you're going to see the dollar be able to buy less and less. When the price of gold goes up, when the price of silver goes up, that's what this means. It's not because gold's getting more expensive. It's because the dollar doesn't buy as much as it used to. We see this happen every day with food and fuel. It's no different with gold and silver. For more information on why gold and silver is a good idea for your preparedness plan, head on over to flyingeaglegold.com and check out all the information that Jeff has on his site. On there, you'll find historical examples and references of why this is something you really need to consider. And when you're ready to make your purchase, give Jeff a call. He's going to help you out. flyingeaglegold.com. Okay, so just a couple more things I want to get to. Let's talk about pry bars. Now, I know there's everything from the small crowbar to the huge, 6 foot, 30-pound pry bars. What do you recommend as a good general purpose, general use pry bar for, you're not going to use it around the home very often, but if you had to evacuate or bug out, I can definitely see that being a tool that you would need or want to have.
Crowbar. Simple, just the simple crowbar, the old style crowbar that has, one angled pry end and a shepherd's hook other end. That's it. There you go.
Not the flat type?
The flat types are specialized for going ahead and doing things like prying light duty stuff. You can get them, they'll fit in tighter areas, but they're not going to be able to have the mass. And when you get down to it, for a lot of the uses with a crowbar is you're not using it with another tool. You've got two hands on this thing and you're slamming it into stuff. The other thing to watch though is make sure they're properly tempered. There are a lot of crowbars and a lot of Chinese source crowbars that are very, very soft steel. You can't actually put a lot of leverage on them without them bending, and it becomes useless. You do need a high quality crowbar.
How do you know? How can you tell if it's tempered?
Basically, manufacturer. Basically, if it's coming, primarily if it's coming out of China, I'm suspect on those. I've seen too many of those fail, and they don't fail in a catastrophic way. It's just you wind up putting 200 pounds on, and all of a sudden the thing turns into a pretzel. Well, darn it, that's not. It didn't work. I don't need this. I can't put a block under it. I can't get additional leverage. This thing is just.
Right.
Where's my good tool? Where's the East Wing? Where is it? Who'd I loan it to? Where's his number?
Okay, so what do you recommend as the way that would be the best way for us to carry the tools? I mean, we've got metal toolboxes, plastic toolboxes. We've got bags. We've got. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to carry them. As I was telling you earlier, I have a canvas tool roll that is from the military, and I like it because it makes everything very compact. But at the same time, I have to basically open it and unroll it every time I want to get a tool. It's nowhere near as it's nowhere near as convenient as a toolbox, but at the same time, it does keep them very secure, and it's very tight and compact. So, given the prepper's goal for being prepared to be able to use these and store them well and stuff, what do you recommend as some of the best ways to carry these tools?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Just for general use, there are a lot of more or less of a tool roll. Bucket Buddy was the first one that came out that actually used 5-gallon buckets. They drape over the sides of the buckets. You've got the internal storage on the bucket, plus a bunch of pockets and a fabric holster, basically. Those are nice to have. I have a few of those still around, but what I've started to go with is large, basically plumber's tool bags. The only problem with those is that you can put so many tools into it that it's literally 120 pounds. So just be ready for that. So sometimes smaller is better on those, just to be able to go ahead and actually manipulate them. Tool rolls work fine. Problem with tool rolls is for a lot of these tools that you have here, we haven't gotten into things like chisels and files and stuff. You don't want them contacting each other at all. You'll go ahead, you'll destroy them. You're going to have a lot more maintenance on them. You're going to be sharpening them all the time. So you can't just have that generalized tool roll. You've got to have specialized tool rolls. Again, it's not a bad thing. It's just one of those things you got to deal with. Other standards that they have are the metal toolboxes or the old Craftsman's wooden toolbox to use. I've still got a few of those floating around here. But just as far as being able to go ahead and utilize, store, contain the standard tools that are out there, I use the plumber's tool bags now. Fairly large size, but that's probably the best bet.
You know, I was looking at a lot of the toolboxes, the plastic ones and stuff they've got at the hardware stores, and I just don't know if I trust them as far as what I'm looking for. Like I said, I'm looking for a tool kit as a prepper, which means I'm looking for items and I'm looking for a way to carry it that if I throw it into my truck in a panic, I'm not going to break the corner off on the plastic and have tools start spilling out.
Exactly.
And I've been looking at some of these bags, and they got some really nice bags, but they're on the expensive side.
Oh, yeah.
But I think, with all things considered, that, they have to be, heavy stitched. They need to have heavy material. They need to be reinforced. As with my fast packs, I prefer storing stuff in bags because they're easier to pack away, and they're flexible and stuff like that. So, I the more I think about it, I think I'm going to try to look and see and get some of the plumber bags and take a look and see what they've got available.
Yeah, look into them, and again, get them with the concept that you're going to be going ahead and not just throwing everything in a massive pile into them, but you'll have supplemental tool rolls inside to control those specialty tools. The other thing is, if you want to get rigid toolboxes, right now for steel ones, unless you're paying a lot of money, the quality is not really there anymore. If you get the older ones, you'll take a look at them. The sheet metal's a lot thicker. The actual flanges are built wider. Rivets or spot welds are, a lot more numerous. So in that case, if you can get a good older one, from an estate sale or something like that, I definitely focus on that. But just, like Rob says, it's a little harder to go ahead and stack in stuff, but it will go ahead and preserve the tools a little bit better. As far as the plastic boxes, unfortunately, plastic boxes that I found, they just do not last. They oxidize. It's a hard use environment, so they just don't last. The only place I'll really go ahead and use plastic boxes for is I've got modular organizers that are basically briefcase size that I'll go ahead and I'll put the varieties of fasteners or electrical wall plates or whatever I've got in these, and I've got stacks of these things, and those seem to last fairly well. They still, 3 or 4 years, they're on their way out. The handles are starting to break off. So, yeah, bags personally are the way to go. Or, take a look at the Bucket Buddy if you've got the space. The only problem is that it's an open system, so you can't just throw it into a truck and expect everything to still be there.
Yeah, I look at those, and they're highly attractive because of the organization that they have. But the fact that they're open and they take up a lot of space around it. They're not very space efficient. Highly organized, but not very space efficient.
Well, they're nice. In my line of work, they're nice to be able to go ahead. You pull up to the job site, and it's something that you will pull out of the back of the truck. You can stock it with the tools and the supplies that you'll need for that particular job, and you just walk it inside. It's perfect for that. As far as storage, not so much. Again, the stuff goes back into the bags or into special boxes and that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's exactly this is a good illustration of the compromises that we have to make as preppers. Is that, the Bucket Buddy would be highly useful, highly efficient, very organized, and very useful because the tools are right there. You don't have to go digging for them. However, at the same time, it doesn't really work as far as something that I can make sure my tools are secured and packed in an efficient manner where I can, stuff them someplace or throw it in the back of the truck and not have to worry about them scattering everywhere.
Yeah.
So, so again, it is a compromise, just like everything else that we have to deal with.
Sure. And it's two different purposes when you get down to it. Two different items. One is actually a tool organizer. The other one is basically a tool caddy, something you're actually going to use at the job. Should you have both? Yeah, sure. Will you have both? Yeah, maybe not. You can work up to it. You can make it for that matter. Doesn't say it has to have, it doesn't have to say Bucket Buddy on the side.
Right. Greg, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge of tools and how to find quality tools and stuff like that. I really appreciate it. Folks, thanks for downloading and listening to the podcast. You can reach me through the website at thepreparednesspodcast.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/preparednesspodcast. We're also on Twitter as Prepcast. And, of course, you can email me directly at rob@prepcast.info. Until next time, enjoy life and be safe.